Disclaimer: I doesn't claim any of the arts. All the picture shown belongs to the respective artist and company. If you are original owner and want me to remove the video, I will do it immediately. Just send me an email to inform me. And if you liked my content, please subscribe to the channel. Chapter begins and we see that Luca's punch was incredibly powerful, sending the bald man crashing into the ceiling. The gun the man had been holding fell to the floor. As it dropped, 3 other gangsters quickly raised their own weapons. Luca swiftly caught the fallen gun and fired 3 precise shots, hitting each gangster and knocking them out cold. The man who appeared to be their leader then began shooting at Luca, but every shot he fired missed its target. Luca couldn't help but mock the man's poor aim, wondering how someone so inept at shooting could survive as a killer. Luca took aim at him, fired, and the sound of the shot echoed through the room. Suddenly, the bathroom door swung open, and a man stepped out holding a stun baton. He looked confused and asked what was happening. Seeing the chaos Luca had caused in just a few seconds, the man froze in fear. Luca aimed the gun at him and suggested he knock himself out if he wanted to avoid serious injury. With no other choice, the man used the stun baton on himself and collapsed to the ground. Despite this, Luca sensed that someone else was still in the bathroom. He opened another door and found a woman lying lifeless inside. Luca's expression changed, and he began cursing the gangsters for their brutal actions. Outside, Kinuan waited and commented that Luca had taken only 12 seconds to finish the job. As Luca carried the woman out in his arms, he suggested killing everyone involved. However, Kinuan warned Luca not to cause further disruptions that would break the rules of the lower sector. He reminded Luca about the countless people in the lower sector who couldn't defend themselves. The woman Luca was carrying was a tragic example of that. Someone powerless to fight back against violence. Luca reminded himself how he had struggled to gain power to avoid the same fate. Normally, Luca would dismiss people like her as fools who failed to seize opportunities offered by the Empire, but at that moment, he felt only disgust at how unfair society's structure was. For the rest of the day, Kinuan sent Luca into fights without giving him any information beforehand. These weren't just training sessions for combat, they were lessons on how to adapt to any situation quickly. Luca had to analyze not only his opponent's abilities, but also his surroundings to decide the best actions to take. After a few days, they visited a workshop where a woman named Gilda, who wore glasses and had a calm presence, greeted them warmly. Kinuan ordered a long black coffee with oil, while Luca asked for coffee without it. Luca wondered why they had stopped there, and Kinuan asked if he ever felt proud seeing someone he had saved working hard and rebuilding their life. Gilda had been rescued by Luca from the gang months ago. She explained that she had been kidnapped because a friend who stole money from the gang had stayed at her house. The gang found her and took her instead, killing her friend in cold blood. Though she had gone through horrible experiences, Gilda had managed to recover and return to her normal life. As they waited for their drinks, Kinuan told Luca that Gilda was an orphan with a remarkable talent for mechanical engineering. Kinuan had secretly funded her education, though Gilda didn't know it was him. Just then, Gabriel entered the shop and was surprised to see them. He ordered a beer, but Gilda advised against it, saying his neural system was already strained from his work. Gabriel, however, insisted on just 1 beer. Gabriel sat with them and guessed that Luca had been stirring up trouble lately. He warned that the gang bosses were already planning to retaliate against Luca. If that happened, Gabriel feared he wouldn't be able to protect Gilda from harm. Kinuan reassured him, saying they wouldn't be able to come to the lower sector for a while. Gilda nervously asked how long that would be, but Kinuan said he wasn't sure. It could be months or even years. Luca realized this might be his last time seeing Gabriel and Gilda, since trainees like him needed permission from superiors to return to the lower sector. Even after all she had endured, Gilda had found a way to move on and work hard again. Gabriel, on the other hand, continued to take risks in his line of work, always pushing the limits. Luca reminded himself not to feel sorry for them. Staying away from the lower sector was probably the best thing for his current situation and training. Later, in the Chief Centurion's office, Luca reported Kinuan's recent activities with him. Hemilas remarked how unusual it was. He remembered that Kinuan had become a trainee at an unusually late age, something that normally wouldn't have been allowed. However, during that time, the Empire had to accept anyone, even those deemed unsuitable, because chaos was widespread and they needed all the help they could get. Hemilas admitted he didn't know much about what kind of person Kinuan was when Hemilas was still a new recruit. Kinuan was already a key member of the Imperial Guards, respected for his skills. He guessed Kinuan specialized in secretive and discreet operations, often working behind the scenes. Luca was surprised to learn that even the current chief centurion didn't have access to Kinuan's records, which were highly classified. Regardless, it seemed Kinuan had taken a liking to Luca, since previous trainees assigned to him never lasted long and were often reassigned or dismissed. Hemilas praised Luca's abilities, but warned that he was still susceptible to negative influences and needed to be careful. He then announced that a psychological exam was scheduled for Luca, just as Luca had expected. Hemilas revealed that trainees on missions like Luca's usually faced one of two outcomes. They were either eliminated in secret if they failed, or promoted to the top ranks of the Imperial Guards as a reward for their success. Hemilas expressed hope that Luca would achieve the latter and rise through the ranks. Luca responded that he was simply following orders and expected Hemilas to vouch for him if he succeeded. Hemilas gave a sinister smile and promised to support Luca if that happened. In fact, he declared that he would adopt Luca as his son, saying the name Luca Custoria had a nice ring to it. This revelation left Luca shocked. He couldn't believe the chief centurion wanted to adopt him into such a prestigious family. As he lay on a strange machine, Luca thought about how the Custoria family was one of the most well-known and respected families in the Empire. He couldn't wrap his head around being accepted into such a lineage. An assistant robot then announced the start of the psychological exam. It noticed the joy on Luca's face and asked if something good had happened. Luca smirked and told the robot to begin the test, saying it wasn't any of its concern. The robot nodded and started the exam, which would determine Luca's mental stability and readiness for further missions. Luca was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that his future in the Imperial Guards depended on it. Ile was training intensely, punching and kicking a heavy bag until sweat dripped to the floor. He finished his session with one final powerful hit, sending the bag flying across the room. Despite his impressive strength, Ile was in pain and took the time to treat his prosthetic arm with some remedies. Luca noticed that Ile wasn't the same person he used to know. He was pushing himself too hard, and his joints might wear out from the strain. Ile asked Luca if he had passed the exam, and Luca admitted that it was only because of his own efforts that Ile had succeeded. Luca sensed that Ile was struggling with something and offered to help him. Ile said he couldn't talk about it yet, but might ask for a favor soon. Luca gave him a serious look and promised to protect him in combat, even if it meant risking his own life. Ile thanked him but hoped things wouldn't turn out the way he feared. Luca was curious about Ile's favor, but didn't try to figure it out. With the psychological exam passed and the chief centurion's trust earned, Luca shifted his focus to becoming part of the prestigious Custoria family. These thoughts stayed with him until his next mission began. Hemilas announced that their trainee unit would now operate under a special military order to suppress rebels led by the notorious Ramones family. Luca broke into a cold sweat upon hearing this news. He glanced at Ile, remembered Lillian, and realized what Ile's favor might involve. The mention of the Ramones family brought back memories of Lillian, and Luca wondered if Ile's favor had something to do with her. The soldiers boarded their transport, and Luca introduced himself as the leader of the 21st Suppression Army platoon. The soldiers saluted in response, showing respect for their new commander. Luca was surprised that the Empire made trainees lead platoons using the rebellion as a training exercise. He thought it was unusual, but understood the strategic reasoning behind it. His platoon was split into 2 squads with 27 members, and Sergeant Kadra, his trusted aide, was a seasoned veteran. The Suppression Army mostly consisted of experienced soldiers, and Luca knew they wouldn't trust or follow a leader they doubted. Luca had 2 choices: rely on Kodra to manage things, or assert his authority directly. He chose the second option, declaring himself superior to the soldiers and warning them to follow his orders or face punishment. The soldiers felt uneasy. Kodra tried to intervene, but Luca grabbed him and threw him toward the platoon. Luca accused Kodra of treating him like a child, revealing that he had grown up in a low-class orphanage, just like many of them, but had risen above them through hard work and determination. Luca promised they would soon realize he was the best leader they'd ever have. Kodra apologized, breaking into a cold sweat as he understood Luca's decision to take the harder path. Luca walked away, recognizing Kodra's understanding of his leadership style. Later, at an outpost near the enemy fort, Ile confronted Luca about his temper. Luca explained that he couldn't let his aides see him as weak or inexperienced. Ile reminded him that they were still considered children in the eyes of the veterans, but Luca argued that treating subordinates too kindly wouldn't earn their respect. Suddenly, the lights dimmed, and Hemilas briefed the trainees on their mission. He explained that the rebels were stationed at an ancient arcane civilization relic site, protected by a high-density force barrier and turrets. He outlined the mission. The 11th Armored Brigade would destroy the turrets, and the rest of the army would attack from all sides. The operation would begin in 90 minutes, and they were ordered to prepare. The trainees listened intently, knowing the importance of their role in the mission. Luca and Ale met privately to discuss their concerns. Luca complained about their supporting role in the mission, feeling that they were not being utilized to their full potential. Ile said it was an obvious decision, as the Empire wouldn't let trainees die easily. They were still learning and needed to gain experience. Luca joked about how this mission wouldn't be any different from a picnic, trying to lighten the mood. Ile commented that Luca sounded like a war hawk, always ready for battle. When Ile brought up the Ramones family, Luca warned him not to side with them. If he did, he'd be seen as a traitor. And even his family couldn't save him from the consequences. Ile admitted he only wanted to save Lillian. Luca asked if Ile loved her enough to risk his life for her. Ile said she had been his first love, but he no longer had feelings for her. Luca couldn't believe Ile had once tried to set him up with Ile's first love. Ile reminded him that Lillian didn't want to marry a noble, preferring a simpler life. Luca warned him that this was crossing the line. If Ile made any attempts to save Lillian, he would be executed on the spot for treason. Ile agreed not to do anything stupid but walked away with a serious expression, leaving Luca wondering if he was truly committed to following orders. Luca suspected Ile was lying, thanks to Archie's Victima, and he knew Ile would do anything to save Lillian. However, Luca believed she had to die as part of the mission. He could only hope Ile wouldn't find her alive, as that was his desperate wish to avoid any complications. And with that, this chapter ends. Thank you for watching this video until the end. Support this channel by liking this video and subscribing the channel. And if you want me to recap another manhwa or manga, write its name on comment section. And if you want to know what happened in previous chapter, you can watch them in this YouTube channel.